Thanksgiving was a day we cherished more than any other on the calendar. It was not merely about the food, the crisp autumn air, or the parades on the old television screen. It was about the tradition, a silent promise we had kept to ourselves and our family for over 4 decades. We would open our home, our hearts, and our kitchen to those we loved most, ensuring a day of warmth, abundance, and shared laughter. This year, however, something felt different. An unfamiliar weariness had settled in our bones, a deep-seated ache that no amount of rest seemed to alleviate. We both felt it, a quiet, unspoken understanding that passed between us in the small glances we exchanged. I, Arthur, at 68 years old, found myself moving slower than usual. My wife, Eleanor, who was 67, a woman whose energy had always seemed boundless, was also subdued. The endless parade of festive dishes, each a testament to her culinary prowess and our shared history, felt like a monumental task. The turkey, a 17-pound masterpiece, was browning to perfection in the oven, its skin a deep, burnished gold. The air was thick with the scent of sage and thyme, of cinnamon and nutmeg, a comforting fragrance that usually filled me with joy but this year only served as a stark contrast to the hollowness in my gut. We had insisted on doing it all ourselves, a point of pride we would not relinquish. This was our way of showing our love, a final act of devotion to the family we had so carefully built. We knew we were not well. A series of small, unsettling symptoms had plagued us for weeks. Persistent headaches, a lingering cough, and a bone-deep fatigue that made even the simplest tasks feel Herculean. We had an appointment scheduled for the following week, but we had refused to let it overshadow our cherished holiday. This dinner was our offering, a gesture of unwavering love, despite the silent warning signs our bodies were so desperately sending us. Our son, Mark, and his wife, Jennifer, arrived precisely 32 minutes late. They did not apologize. Mark, our once gentle boy, now a man of 44 with a stern face and an expensive watch, entered first. He barely offered a smile. Jennifer, a woman with a perpetually perfect hairstyle and a condescending gaze, followed closely behind him. They both looked around our home, the place where Mark had grown up, with a detached, critical air. Our home, filled with decades of memories and carefully chosen furniture, was in their eyes nothing more than a relic. "The house smells so old," Jennifer remarked, not to us, but to Mark, loud enough for us to hear. She wrinkled her nose slightly, as if she had just stepped into a forgotten, dusty attic. Mark simply nodded in agreement, not meeting our eyes. The words were a physical blow, a sudden rush of cold air in our warm, fragrant kitchen. Eleanor's hands, which had been deftly adding a final flourish to the mashed potatoes, trembled slightly. I felt a surge of bitterness, a sharp, metallic taste on my tongue. "We have been busy preparing everything," Eleanor said, her voice strained, a polite mask over the deep hurt in her eyes. "We hope you will enjoy it." "Of course, Mother," Jennifer replied, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "It is just, this whole setting feels so traditional. A bit outdated, do you not think, Mark?" Mark cleared his throat. "It is what it is, Jen. They are set in their ways. Mother, father, where are the others? The children will be here soon." His children, our grandchildren, were the sole reason we pushed through our exhaustion. We wanted to see them, to hold them, to give them the warmth they deserved. But they did not arrive, and a crushing sense of disappointment began to settle over us. The evening progressed with a quiet, heavy tension. Mark and Jennifer ate in polite silence, offering no compliments on the food that had taken us days to prepare. Their conversation revolved around their own lives, their expensive vacations, their business ventures, and the people they knew. It was as if we were not there, as if we were merely part of the furniture, silent witnesses to their grand lives. "You know, Mother and Father," Mark began, putting down his fork and looking directly at us, his face unreadable. "Jennifer and I have been talking. You both are not getting any younger." Eleanor and I exchanged a look. We both knew where this conversation was headed. We had felt this conversation in the air since they arrived. "We are perfectly fine," Eleanor said, a defensive edge to her voice. "We have each other." That is exactly the point, Jennifer interjected, her smile too wide, too sharp. You are just two people in this giant house. It is a lot of work for you. And, honestly, it is a lot of maintenance. We are worried about you. What if something were to happen? I felt the blood drain from my face. Nothing is going to happen. We are quite capable. But you are not, Arthur, Mark said, his tone a cold, clinical pronouncement. We received your call this morning. You said you were going for a checkup next week. I am sorry, but this is a sign. You are sick. You are growing old. You cannot live like this anymore. Jennifer's laughter was a brittle, sharp sound. He is right. You both are sick. You are old. You are a burden on us. The words hit us with the force of a physical blow. The festive lights in the dining room suddenly seemed dim, the warmth in the room a distant memory. A burden? I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. We spent days preparing this feast for you. We just told you we are going for a routine checkup. Exactly, Mark said, his voice rising in impatience. And you will keep having more of those. These are signs. What if you get a major illness? We are the ones who will be responsible for your medical bills. We are the ones who have to take care of you. Do you not think we have our own lives to live? Our own children to care for? We are not a burden, Eleanor said, her voice shaking with righteous fury. We have our own money. We have our own savings. We do not need you to take care of us. Your savings will not last long with these healthcare costs, Jennifer said, her eyes gleaming with a kind of predatory calculation. This house is worth a fortune. Selling it now would secure your future and ours. The silence that followed was deafening. It was a silence filled with the crushing weight of betrayal, the bitter truth of their greed, and the cold, unfeeling nature of their hearts. We had just offered them our love and our labor, and they had responded by calculating the value of our home, the cost of our existence, and the inconvenience of our old age. We spent the rest of the evening in a fog of disbelief. The meal, the tradition, the love we had poured into it all, felt like a cruel joke. We had done something good, something important for our family, and in return, we had been met with disdain, mockery, and a chilling glimpse into their true intentions. We had been laughed at. Our illness, a private concern, was now a weapon they were using against us. As they left, promising to call sometime next week, Mark gave us a cold, perfunctory hug. Jennifer offered a fleeting, insincere smile. We stood in the doorway, two old people, broken and alone, as the car's headlights disappeared into the night. We did not cry. There was no time for tears. There was only the cold, hard realization that we were on our own, and the battle for our dignity, our independence, and our very lives had just begun. We had been laughed at, but we knew in our hearts that this was not the end. It was the beginning. The diagnosis was a simple, uncomplicated truth, a common viral infection, easily managed with rest and a course of antibiotics. The doctor, a kind-faced man who had known us for years, had given us a reassuring pat on the shoulder. You are both in excellent health for your age, he had said, a gentle smile on his face. Just take it easy for a week or two, and you will be back to your old selves. Relief should have washed over us, a warm, comforting tide that soothes all worries. Instead, a cold, hard resolve set in. The doctor's words were a bitter irony, a stark contrast to the venom our children had so carelessly spat at us. We were not sick. We were not frail. We were not, as Jennifer had so blithely declared, a burden. The diagnosis was a vindication, but it was also a sharpened weapon in the hands of our enemies. We knew that the truth would not matter to them. The illness, real or imagined, was merely a pretext for their greed. We walked out of the hospital into the weak winter sunlight, a pair of strangers in a world that had suddenly become hostile. The world outside had not changed, but we had. The pain from the betrayal had hardened into a resolve so sharp it felt like a new part of us. It was a shared wound and a shared purpose. They did not care about us, Eleanor said, her voice hollow. They only cared about the house. And the money. I nodded, unable to speak. The image of Jennifer's calculating eyes, Mark's cold, impassive face, haunted me. Their laughter, the brittle, sharp sound that had accompanied the word burden, echoed in my ears. It was not a casual cruelty, it was a deliberate, premeditated assault on our dignity. The drive home was silent, heavy with unspoken thoughts. The familiarity of our neighborhood, the well-tended lawns, and the stately oak trees felt alien now. This was the fortress we had built, the home where we had raised our family, and now it was a prize to be taken, a commodity to be sold. We had to defend it. We had to defend ourselves. The first few days were a blur of cold anger and grief. We did not speak of the incident. We simply existed, moving through our home like ghosts, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The holiday decorations, a symbol of our cherished traditions, now felt like a cruel mockery. The untouched leftovers from the Thanksgiving feast sat in the refrigerator, a monument to our wasted effort. One evening, as we sat in the living room, a silence so profound and sad had settled between us. Eleanor spoke. "They think we are helpless, Arthur," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "They think we are old and confused. They think they can take everything from us." "They will not," I said, my voice hoarse. "I will not let them." "We must be smart," she said, a flicker of something I had not seen in years, a fiery determination, lighting up her eyes. "We must think like them. They believe they have the advantage. They believe they are the young, and we are the old. We must show them they are wrong. We must make them understand that our age is not a weakness, it is our strength." That evening, a plan began to form, a silent, unspoken understanding that passed between us. We began with small things. We stopped answering their phone calls immediately. When they called, we would let it ring and then call them back an hour later. It was a small act of defiance, a way of asserting our control, of letting them know that our lives did not revolve around their whims. Their attempts to contact us increased. Mark called, his voice laced with feigned concern. "Father, we have been worried about you. You are not answering the phone. Are you taking your medication? Have you been eating well?" I responded with a clipped politeness, giving him no opportunity to pry. "We are doing perfectly fine, Mark. We are simply busy. We will talk to you later." The phone call ended abruptly, the sharp click of the receiver a testament to his frustration. We knew we were getting to him. He was not used to being ignored. The next call was from Jennifer, her voice oozing with false sweetness. "Mother, darling, I was just calling to check in on you. I was thinking we should come over and help you with the garden. It must be too much for you to handle." Eleanor's response was a masterpiece of cold, cutting politeness. "Thank you for your concern, Jennifer. But we are quite capable. We are planning a major renovation, actually. A new project." The lie hung in the air, a beautiful, powerful weapon. Jennifer was stunned into silence. "A renovation? What kind of renovation?" She finally managed to stammer. "Oh, it is a secret," Eleanor said, her voice a low, teasing purr. "You will have to wait and see." This was our first victory, a small, yet significant one. The idea of a secret project would gnaw at them, feeding their greed and their paranoia. It would make them question everything they thought they knew about us. They had dismissed us as old, frail, and predictable. We were now going to become unpredictable. The next step was to begin gathering our resources. We sat down at our old mahogany desk, the very one where we had paid bills and written letters for over 40 years, and began the long, meticulous process of assessing our finances. We went through every bank statement, every stock certificate, every insurance policy. Our lives, our shared history, were laid out before us in a series of numbers and papers. We had always been frugal, living well within our means. We had saved, we had invested, we had planned for this time in our lives. We had more than enough to live comfortably, to travel, to enjoy our remaining years. Our children, however, knew nothing of the true extent of our wealth. They knew of our modest retirement fund, the money we used for our daily expenses. They did not know about the second account, the one we had opened over 20 years ago, a silent, secret testament to our foresight. "We have more than enough," I said, a sense of quiet triumph swelling in my chest. "They are wrong. We are not a burden. We are financially independent. We do not need them." "No," Eleanor said, a grim smile on her face. "They need us. Or, they think they do. We must make them believe they are about to lose everything. The tension in the following days was palpable. Mark and Jennifer's calls became more frequent, their questions more pointed. They would try to casually drop by, only to be met with a locked door and a polite, yet firm, refusal. "We are busy, darling," Jennifer would hear through the phone. "We are working on our new project. We will call you when we have a free moment." The mystery of this secret project consumed them. They began to suspect we were hiding something. Their greed, their impatience, and their fear of being cut out of our lives was a weapon we were now using against them. We could almost feel their frustration from miles away, their constant attempts to get information from us. The final straw came a few weeks later. Mark called, his voice no longer feigning concern, but filled with a barely contained rage. "We saw the realtor's sign across the street, Father. The Miller's house is for sale. We are buying it. We have been working with our bank on a new loan for months now." He paused, a triumphant note in his voice. "We wanted to be closer to you, to help you with things. The kids are getting older, and they will need a place to stay when they come home from college. We thought it would be a good investment." Eleanor and I looked at each other, our hearts sinking. This was a move we had not anticipated. They were not just after our money. They were planning to move in on us, to control our lives, to make themselves a part of our home, our every moment. Their plan was to buy the house next to ours, to put a constant, unbearable pressure on us, to make our lives a living hell. It was a new level of manipulation and cruelty. "That is wonderful, Mark," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the shock. "We are so happy for you. We will talk to you soon." We hung up the phone, our hands trembling. The game had just changed. The stakes had been raised. They were not just lurking in the shadows, waiting for us to die. They were actively moving in, planning to take control. "They are not going to win," Eleanor said, her eyes blazing with fury. "We are going to fight back. And we are going to show them that we are not old, we are not sick, and we are not a burden. We are a force to be reckoned with." The real battle for our dignity had begun. The phone call from Mark had been a declaration of war, a cold and calculated pronouncement that they were not merely circling like vultures, but actively moving in to occupy the territory. The Miller's house, a charming two-story home with a wide porch and a meticulously kept garden, had been a symbol of our quiet, peaceful neighborhood for over 30 years. Now it was a beachhead, a staging ground for our children's insidious campaign. The very thought of Mark and Jennifer living across the street, their presence a constant, inescapable shadow, sent a shiver of dread through my bones. "They are not going to win, Arthur," Eleanor had said, her eyes blazing with a fury I had not seen in decades. But the confidence in her voice was a fragile shield against the fear and desperation that had taken hold of us. The days that followed were an ordeal. The peace we had so cherished was shattered, replaced by the jarring, relentless sounds of demolition and construction. The rhythmic thud of hammers, the high-pitched whine of saws, and the deep rumble of trucks filled our home. Our sanctuary, once a quiet refuge filled with the familiar sounds of our lives, was now an echo chamber of their ambition. They were not just renovating, they were tearing apart the very fabric of our lives, piece by piece. The noise was a physical manifestation of their disrespect, a constant, abrasive reminder that they were there and they were not going away. We tried to maintain our routine, to cling to the small comforts that had always defined our days. We would sit down to breakfast in our kitchen, the morning sun streaming through the window, but the clatter from across the street made conversation impossible. We would try to read in the living room, but the vibrations from the heavy machinery made the pages tremble in our hands. Our home, which had once felt so warm and inviting, now felt like a cage. We were not just being watched, we were being besieged. The unannounced visits began almost immediately. Jennifer would appear at our door, her face a mask of false sweetness, a casserole dish in her hands. "Mother, Father, I just wanted to bring you this," she would say, her eyes scanning our living room, her gaze lingering on the antiques, the paintings, the family photos. "I know how much all this noise must be for you. It must be so much stress. You are not getting any younger, you know. I am just so worried." She was not worried. She was a scout, an infiltrator, looking for signs of weakness. She would ask pointed questions about the secret project, her curiosity thinly veiled by her feigned concern. "So, what is this big renovation you are working on, Mother? You never told me. Is it a new bathroom? We are tearing out our old one. We could offer you some of our new fixtures." Eleanor, a master of passive resistance, would simply smile and say, "It is a surprise, dear. You will just have to wait and see. We have it all under control." The words, though polite, were a direct challenge. We had become locked in a silent, psychological battle. They were attempting to wear us down with their presence, their noise, their constant intrusions. We were fighting back with secrecy and defiance. It was a war of attrition, and we were beginning to feel the strain. One evening, as we sat in our dining room, the silence broken only by the distant, muffled sound of a power saw, I looked at Eleanor. The lines around her eyes seemed deeper, her shoulders stooped with a weariness that went beyond the physical. The vibrant fire that had once burned in her eyes was now a faint, flickering ember. "I am so tired, Arthur," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I just want it all to stop. I want our home back." A wave of profound helplessness washed over me. I felt a pang of guilt, a deep, gnawing sense that I had failed her. I should have protected her from this. We had worked so hard, all our lives, to build this life, this home, this family, and it was all being dismantled by the very people we had built it for. The bitter irony of it all was a heavy weight on my chest. "We will not give up, Eleanor," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "We will not let them win." "We cannot just wait for them to leave," she said, a new, cold glint in her eyes. "We must fight back. We must make a move." This was the moment. The passive resistance had served its purpose, but now it was time for action. The very next day, we made an appointment. Not with a realtor, not with a financial advisor, but with our old friend and lawyer, Charles. He was a man of impeccable integrity, a man who had guided us through all of life's major milestones, from buying our first home to setting up our wills. We trusted him implicitly. The drive to his office was a journey from one world into another. We left behind the sound of hammers and saws, the looming presence of our children, and entered a world of calm, quiet professionalism. Charles, a man with a shock of white hair and a kind, thoughtful face, greeted us warmly. He listened patiently as we recounted the entire ordeal, from the Thanksgiving dinner to the news of their home purchase. As we spoke, his expression changed from one of friendly concern to one of cold, simmering rage. "That is despicable, Arthur," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Utterly despicable. They are treating you like assets to be managed, not people to be cherished." He leaned back in his leather chair, his fingers steepled under his chin, his eyes closed in thought. "You have two options here," he said, his voice firm and clear. "You can give in. You can sell your home, move to a retirement community, and allow them to take control of your lives. Or you can fight. You can use the resources at your disposal to show them that you are not frail, you are not weak, and you are not to be trifled with." Eleanor and I looked at each other. There was no hesitation. The answer was already in our hearts. "We're going to fight, Charles," I said, my voice steady. "We are going to do something. We are not going to be a burden. We are not going to be laughed at. We are going to show them that we are a force to be reckoned with." "Good," he said, a grim smile on his face. "I thought you would say that. Now, let us talk about your trust funds." The conversation that followed was the first step in our plan. We had always been discreet about our finances, keeping our significant investments and our trust funds a complete secret from our children. Mark and Jennifer were under the assumption that our primary assets were our home and our modest retirement savings. They had no idea about the decades of careful planning, the investments we had made, the inheritance we had received from my late aunt, and the other accounts we had opened over the years. They saw a house and a small nest egg. We saw an empire. "The best way to fight a war is with deception," Charles said, his voice a low, confidential whisper. "You must make them believe you are doing something entirely different from what you are actually doing." We left Charles's office feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The despair had been replaced by a quiet, burning determination. We were no longer passive victims. We were active participants in a game we had just decided to win. The following morning, the noise from across the street was more unbearable than ever. A large truck, a backhoe, and a crew of workers were all in the front yard. Mark and Jennifer were standing on the lawn, pointing and gesturing, their faces animated with excitement. I saw Jennifer glance over at our house, a smirk on her face, a look of triumph that said, "We have won. We are here, and you cannot stop us." She was wrong. We walked to the mailbox and pulled out a small, official-looking envelope. It was a registered letter from a prominent law firm, one that handled high-stakes property deals. I had asked Charles to send it to us, knowing that Mark, with his insatiable curiosity and his desire to control, would be watching. "This is it, Eleanor," I said, a grim smile on my face. "The first step of our plan. Let them see this. Let them wonder. Let their greed and paranoia become our greatest weapon." We walked back into our home, the letter clutched in my hand. We did not know what the future held. We did not know if our plan would work. But we knew one thing for certain: we were not going to be silenced, we were not going to be ignored, and we were not going to be a burden. We were going to fight. And we were going to win. The small, official-looking envelope, a seemingly innocuous piece of paper, had a power far beyond its size. It was a fuse, lit and ready, designed to ignite a fire of paranoia and greed. We had a plan, a quiet, deceptive war we were waging right under their noses. They believed they were the ones in control, tearing down walls across the street, building their dream home, and moving ever closer to our fortune. But they were blind, and we were the ones who held the keys. The noise from the construction next door continued to be a relentless assault on our peace. The rhythm of their ambition, however, now felt different. It no longer felt like a threat, but a soundtrack to our victory. We would watch them from our living room window, a cup of tea in our hands, a grim smile on our faces. We would see Jennifer, her face flushed with excitement, pointing at new windows. We would see Mark, his jaw set with a look of possessive pride, barking orders at the construction crew. They were building their future, oblivious to the fact that we were systematically dismantling it. The registered letter from the law firm did its job perfectly. Within a week, Mark and Jennifer were at our door, a frantic look in their eyes. They no longer had the same cold, confident air. It was replaced by a desperate curiosity, a barely contained anxiety. "Mother, father, what is happening?" Mark asked, his voice strained. "Jennifer and I saw that you received a letter from Peterson and Finch. They're a big law firm, Arthur. They handle estate planning and huge property deals. Is that so?" I replied, my voice a picture of feigned innocence. "We have been so busy with our project, we have not had time to look at the mail properly." "You are so observant, Mark." My sarcasm was lost on him. His eyes, usually so cold and calculating, were now filled with a genuine, desperate curiosity. We were a little concerned," Jennifer said, her voice a saccharine mix of false sweetness and thinly veiled panic. "We thought maybe you were selling the house and did not tell us. You know we are just buying the house next door. It would be a huge inconvenience if you were to move. And who would want to move away from such wonderful neighbors?" Eleanor said, a smile that did not reach her eyes on her face. "You both are doing so much work on your new house. We would not dream of leaving you." The words were a direct hit. They were not worried about our well-being. They were worried about their investment. The house next door was not a symbol of their love for us, but a strategic move to secure their inheritance. The realization of their true intentions, once a source of pain, was now a source of quiet strength. The letter was a small part of our plan. The next and most crucial part was to make them believe we were about to spend a significant portion of our money. We began with small, seemingly innocuous changes. We bought a new car, a sleek, expensive sedan, the kind we would never have bought in a million years. Mark and Jennifer saw it in our driveway, and the look on their faces was a mix of confusion and horror. "A new car?" Mark asked, his voice a disbelieving squeak. "You both do not even drive that much anymore. Why would you spend so much money on a new car?" "We are old, Mark," Eleanor said, a serene look on her face. "We deserve a little luxury. Besides, it is part of our new project. You know, the secret one we told you about?" The word project was a perfect tool, a vague, all-encompassing term that fueled their imagination and their fear. They began to suspect we were spending our money recklessly. They began to suspect we were not as financially stable as they had once thought. Their desperation was palpable. The real game began with a phone call from a financial advisor we had hired through Charles. The man, an actor we had hired, called and spoke to me in a booming, theatrical voice, loud enough for Mark, who was at our house at the time, to hear every word. "Arthur, I have some excellent news," the voice boomed from the phone. "The final contracts for the new resort in Costa Rica have been signed. The funds have been transferred. You are now the proud owners of a beautiful 5-star resort." The name? The Eleanor and Arthur. Mark's face, a picture of smug confidence just moments before, turned to a ghostly white. His jaw dropped, and he stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief and shock. He did not ask questions. He did not say a word. He simply left, his body trembling, his car tires screeching as he sped out of our driveway. The silence that followed was the sweetest sound we had ever heard. The noise from the construction next door, which had been a constant source of pain, suddenly stopped. It was as if their ambition had been snuffed out, replaced by a cold, hard realization. The project, the secret project we had been hinting at, was not a renovation. It was a new life, a new beginning, a new dream, all built on their greed and our deception. The phone rang an hour later. It was Mark, his voice a desperate, panicked plea. "Father, is it true? Is it true about the resort? Did you really spend all that money?" "All what money, Mark?" I asked, my voice a calm, steady wave in a sea of his panic. "We are simply living our lives. The way you told us we should. We are not getting any younger, are we?" The words, the very words he had used against us, were now being used as a weapon against him. It was a sweet, poetic justice. But what about the house?" He stammered, his voice filled with a desperate, childish fear. "What about us? What about your retirement? You cannot just spend all your money like that." "But we can, Mark," Eleanor said, her voice a gentle, yet firm, whisper. "And we did. We are not a burden, are we? We are just two old people, enjoying the fruits of our labor." The truth was that the money for the resort had not been transferred. The phone call had been a complete fabrication. We had used a portion of our savings to purchase a new car, a small price to pay for the priceless look on his face. The resort was a lie, a beautiful, powerful lie that was designed to break their greedy hearts. The following morning, there was a different kind of silence across the street. The construction crew was gone. The backhoe was gone. The large truck was gone. The project, the dream home, the beachhead for their invasion, was now a hollow, empty shell. The realtor's sign, which had once been a symbol of their triumph, was now a monument to their failure. They had been so sure of themselves, so certain of their victory. They had laughed at our illness. They had mocked our old age. They had seen us as nothing more than an inheritance waiting to be claimed. But we had shown them that our age was not a weakness, but a strength, a source of wisdom and a resolve born of a lifetime of struggle. The battle was not yet over, but we knew we were winning. We had shown them that we were not a burden. We were a force to be reckoned with. The silence from across the street was deafening. The backhoe, the construction crew, the furious energy that had defined our lives for weeks, it was all gone. The realtor's sign, with its now mocking for sale banner, stood like a tombstone to Mark and Jennifer's failed ambition. They had bought into a dream, and we, with our quiet, calculated deception, had shown them it was nothing more than a mirage. Their world, built on a foundation of greed, had collapsed. Our world, however, was just beginning. The phone calls did not stop. They were no longer filled with faint concern or thinly veiled curiosity. They were now filled with panic, with accusations, and with a desperate, childlike rage. "You lied to us, Father," Mark screamed into the phone one afternoon. "You lied about the resort. I checked. There is no Eleanor and Arthur resort in Costa Rica. You have ruined us." "We never said the resort existed, Mark," Eleanor said, her voice calm and steady. "We said we were working on a new project. We said we were not getting any younger, and we deserved to enjoy our lives. You just chose to believe what you wanted to believe." That is not our fault, is it? The words were a final, crushing blow. He had assumed, he had calculated, he had been so sure of his victory that he had never once stopped to question the source of his information. His greed had blinded him, and we had simply taken advantage of that. The silence on the other end of the line was a sound of a man's world collapsing. He had lost everything, not because of us, but because of his own greed. The house next door, which they had poured their life savings into, was now a liability. They could not sell it without a huge loss, and they could not afford to finish the renovation. They were trapped. A few weeks later, another car pulled into our driveway. It was our other son, David, and his wife, Sarah. They were not part of this cruel charade. They were the ones who had always been there for us, who had always shown us love and respect. They were the ones we had always wanted to help. "Mother, father," David said, his eyes filled with a deep sadness. "We heard what happened. We are so sorry. We had no idea what they were planning. We have been trying to reach you." We hugged them, the warmth of their embrace a stark contrast to the coldness we had endured. We had never told them about the secret project. We had never told them about the registered letter. They were innocent. Their love for us was real. "We have something to show you," I said, a smile finally reaching my eyes. "Something we have been working on." We led them to our old mahogany desk. On it was a single, official-looking document. It was a deed. A deed to a beautiful piece of property on the coast, with a small, charming house and a breathtaking view of the ocean. "This is for you, David," Eleanor said, her voice filled with a mother's love. "This is a new home. A new life. We want you to have it. You and Sarah have always been there for us. You never asked for anything. You never treated us like a burden. This is our gift to you, for your kindness, your love, and your respect." David and Sarah were speechless. The tears streamed down their faces, a mixture of shock, joy, and overwhelming gratitude. They had been rewarded, not for their greed, but for their love. It was a lesson we had wanted to teach all our children, but only one of them had been willing to learn. The following morning, we did something we had not done in years. We packed our bags. We did not take much. Just a few clothes, some old photographs, and a few cherished memories. The house, which had been a battleground for so long, was now a symbol of our victory. "What about Mark and Jennifer?" David asked, his voice filled with a mixture of concern and confusion. "What are they going to do?" "They will be fine, David," I said, a grim smile on my face. "They have their project. They have their dream home. They will learn to live with their choices. That is the greatest lesson of all." We left our home, the one we had built, the one we had fought for, and we did not look back. We had our new home, our new life, our new purpose. The house we left behind was a reminder of what we had lost, but also of what we had gained. We had lost the respect of our greedy children, but we had gained our dignity, our independence, and a renewed sense of hope. We were not a burden. We were not old. We were not sick. We were simply two people, in the twilight of our lives, embarking on a new journey, a new adventure, a new beginning. We had been laughed at, but we had the last laugh. Our life was not over, it was just beginning.